Welcome, sprinters. You've made it. You've made it to the second week of Master Logseq queries. Say hi in the chat. We are here with more than two handsful of people. Let's see. I already see 13 people tuned in live. And I'm so happy that you're here because this is what makes learning social. By coming together in sessions like these, even though I will be talking for 1 hour straight mostly, I will be looking at the chat. I will be interacting with you. I just want to make sure if you can put in the chat, if you can hear me well, please put it in the chat if you can hear me well. And then before we even get started, before we dive into what we are going to learn and practice this week, I want to hear how the first week went for you. So what was your level when you started? So on Monday, what was your query knowledge like? And on Friday, when you reflected on the week, how was your query knowledge then? So I really want to take a moment to see what was your main takeaway, what surprised you, and what confused you. So before we even go and see what we can do with the knowledge that we've made our own right now, let's see what are some stumbling blocks. All right, sound is good. But please put in the chat what is your main takeaway, what is your main stumbling block, what is something you thought that you understood, and then when you went to try out some things in Logseq was different. I've already seen in Friday's forum post there was some confusion about properties. So as you share what you may be struggling with, I want to share this very briefly because it is something that also confused me in the beginning and I had to check a few things. But what we've learned so far and what we learned actually on day 2 of last week is that whenever you use a link in a parent block, then that link will be applied to all the branches that are child blocks of that parent block. That is very important because when there are multiple links in a branch, we can then use those links as filter values. Now, on Friday, we had a look at block properties, and block properties are very useful to create or add metadata to blocks without cluttering your nodes with links. But there was one confusion, and I want to point that out right now before we get started. And let's see. Yes. So there was this question by GR, and the question was, why is this query, and let's make it a little bit bigger, why is this query not working? So what do we see here? We see, first of all, there's an AND filter, which means that for a block to show in this query, it needs to have both of these properties. Now, why doesn't this work? Because a property is only applied in this case to a block. So Logseq does not look across branches for properties. Now there is a workaround, and please take time to read this conversation if this is what you also ran into. There is a solution, and that is to add links to make links out of your property values. As you can see here, we have the property author, and then the value here you see Carol Dweck. It's between square brackets, which makes it a link. And in that case, you can apply a link to the entire branch, but just keep in mind that the properties itself only apply to this one first block. It doesn't apply to this block. But because in this case, in this example, I made a link out of it, the link will apply to the entire branch. If this confuses you, please go back to the lessons, most notably lesson 2, which talks about links and indentation. And just keep in mind that properties don't behave exactly like links. A property only applies to the block itself. All right. So I see some comments in the chat. Elaslav is sharing what confuses him is the way that Logseq manages dates. Elaslav, maybe you can provide some more context, but the way Logseq handles dates, as we saw in Friday's lesson, the date is basically a property. So when you create a page, you automatically also create a property called created at. So if this is completely unfamiliar to you, please check out lesson 5, because that's where we cover this. But the created at property is only created when you create a page. At the moment, it's not added to blocks. So that is something to keep in mind. And then during this week, as we're building more and more complex workflows with queries, we'll also look at, for example, the between filter, which also was covered in Friday's lesson. But the between filter will come in very handy to filter notes. And in our case, we're going to filter to-dos mostly based on dates. So that is something that is coming up. Let's see some other things that confused you. Yeah, so Arislav, we'll cover that in the challenge later this week. I think it will be on Thursday. So in today's lecture, what are we going to discuss? And if you've already seen the email that I sent earlier, you'll see that you will have seen that I will be sending a training graph, a training data set, and I want to share it with you here live in the lecture. And then at the end of this lecture, you'll receive a link to a file to download this graph. And then we'll go every day, we'll go through the data in the graph, which I will be expanding every day. And then based on some exercises, I challenge you to get as many different queries out of this graph. So without further ado, let's share my screen. And this we already covered. Let's see, we already covered how did week 1 go. If you can, please still answer these questions. What surprised you in week 1? What confused you? What are your main takeaways? And what have you already applied? In week 2, we'll have 5 use cases, so 1 use case per day, and they will all build on each other. So we'll end with a personal learning system, but it all starts with a very simple generic index of notes. And the notes we'll be using are my personal notes. So you will be able to see how I structure my notes. You'll also see that I have different ways to structure my notes, but the main fundamental parts will always be present, namely indentation and links. So this is what we are building today, a generic index of notes, and it's basically just finding back blocks and branches of notes, because that's what it's all about. That's basically everything that queries do in the end, is fetching blocks that are somehow matching your query. Then we'll look at a content consumption pipeline. So we'll see how can you save content to consume later. We'll set up a template to streamline the process, and then we'll create queries to review the content in multiple passes. And let me increase the font size so it's easier to read. Then on Wednesday, we'll dive into content creation. So we take basically the building blocks from today and Tuesday, and then keep adding more and more features and basically building blocks to our queries. So on Wednesday, we'll look at how can we take the content that we've consumed and then do something with it. So we're going to take the highlights and notes, turn them into insights. So we'll basically build a query that will prompt us to expand on highlights. We'll have a basically text collection to review content in multiple passes and to choose what content you want to consume more deeply. And then we'll also dive into flashcards, because basically flashcards are a type of query. Then on Thursday, we'll go into project management. We'll see how to take notes and combine basically notes and action items. Again, we'll use templates for this. Then we'll see how we can use queries to split the notes and the tasks. And then we'll use the between filter basically for reviews, so we can see if we use the journals page for everything. And I really recommend you do, especially when you do project management. But then the question arises, how can you use those dates to review? So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be writing queries to see all items that are finished, that we finished within a specific time period. Then we'll also look at tasks that are overdue. And then that basically you can use to then either update stakeholders or see what tasks are falling through the cracks. So very useful if you want to use Logseq for project management. And then basically we tie everything together and we'll build a personal learning system. So we have then gone from collecting highlights, notes, do something with it, and then we will have taken a look at how do you run projects in Logseq, and then basically all those parts you can combine to manage your own learning projects, because learning comes all down to taking in input, doing something with it, namely making sense of the information, and then having some kind of output. The output could be a skill you practice, or it can be some knowledge that you then spread to others. So no matter your use case, you'll probably take away something useful from this week. All right, let's see if there are any questions or comments before we go into the challenges a little bit more deeply. Mage, you are saying something and I'm just going to share it here in the broadcast. But again, if you have a question, please be as specific as possible. I know that YouTube has a 200 character limit. It's quite difficult. If you run into issues, please send me a DM on the forum. But Mage is saying turning on the block timestamps is hopeless. Every index messes everything up. Yeah, the block timestamps is something we took out because we previously did have some timestamp data on blocks. However, it killed performance. It killed query performance, search performance. So this is something we had to take out. We don't know if we're going to bring this back. If this is really something, if you really want to attach dates to individual blocks, if you basically, you don't want to use the journals pages as a timestamp, or sorry, a date stamp, and you really want to use some other identifier, or sorry, some other property on a block base, on a block level as a date identifier, please let me know, because I do know of some workarounds. again, we would need to utilize templates for this and create links manually for dates, but it's definitely possible. If this is the case for you, please let me know, because it's a little bit of a niche. Use case. I've noticed that most people use the journals pages. So if you use the journals pages, then basically every block that you write on the journals page is tagged with that date. If your workflow is different, if you use separate pages, so not journals pages, and you do want to use dates, please reach out to me so I can see in what way I can help you best. And then towards the end of this week, I can add this to this training graph. All right. Let's continue with the challenges, because I have named them. Let's see. So these are the high-level use cases, and then the challenges are named build a dynamic notes index. That's challenge 1. That's today's challenge. And then we'll see challenge 2, content consumption pipeline. 3 is content creation. 4, project management dashboard. And then 5, personal learning system. How are these set up? I will dive very deeply into today's challenge in a bit, but basically I will give you an introduction. In this case, the introduction is missing because I haven't written it yet, but I will point out what are the features that we're going to use, the high-level goals, and to give you a complete example, let's just dive into challenge 1 for today. So as you can see here, there's an introduction to the lesson. This is not finished yet. I still need to add some information about namespaces. Then the features will act as a hint. So if you get stuck with the exercises, just have a look at the features used. Obviously, the way you can solve the exercises is not using any of these features, although I think it will be difficult to do stuff without links. But challenge yourself. See in what other ways you can query these notes in this graph. So today's exercise, and I'm just going to do a few of these live, so you get a sense of how I would approach this. But the exercise is very simple. Again, it's a handful of challenges like last week. So in this case, the first challenge is to go to the David Perel page and create an index of content based on a property, in this case, the author property. Then the second challenge is to go to the dashboard page and to create an index for all notes to process. In this case, there's a little bit less information. So what you will need to do is go to the all pages and just click around a little bit. So see what is in this graph. So you'll see a lot of pages, but just click into a link and then see how are the notes structured. So familiarize yourself a little bit with the notes. And as you can see here, I've already used some blog properties. Feel free to add your own notes, your own links to these notes and to experiment a little bit with it. Tomorrow you will get a fresh graph, so you can basically start from scratch. So every day, just go wild, experiment as much as you can. Some of these notes are more processed than others. As you can see here, this one has a status to process. And then this one I have on status process. And then you can see, oh, I have a lot of links. So this is, especially these notes we'll use for the next challenge. And that's here. Let's make it bigger again. And that is to go to the Twitter page and create basically 4 different indexes. Then the fourth challenge is to go to the status page, and the status is a property, and then create queries for each value, and then the same basically for videos. I will probably be adding some more some more notes to this graph and also some more challenges, because I just realized I want to talk about namespaces in today's lesson, because namespaces are basically also a query which help to very quickly build a dynamic index of nodes. But I realize I need to add a few more of my nodes to really make the namespace example work. All right. For today, I don't have much more to share. I was hoping to answer some questions, and I'm just going to check my inbox on the forum. Otherwise, we're going to finish this session rather soon, because there's not a lot that I need to show you right now. I really want to use as much as possible the rest of this session to troubleshoot, to answer your questions, to see what confused you. And if there's no input, then we'll keep it short, and then you will get this training data set as soon as possible tonight. Let me have a look at if there are any questions that came in. And then meanwhile, in the chat, put any comments or questions. All right, I see that there are no questions coming in. So again, I want to do a final overview of this week, and then how to approach the challenges, and then maybe in the meanwhile some more questions come in. So for today, let's go back to sharing. So for today, we're going to build a dynamic nodes index, and let's do a little bit of live coding so you can see how to solve these challenges. As you can see here, under the features used, I've placed links, block properties, the end filter, and the property filter. So I'm just going to try and solve this. The first challenge. So I go to the David Perel page. I see there's already a query, so I'm quickly going to remove that, and then see the exercise. So let's zoom out a little bit. And the challenge is on the David Perel page, create an index of his content based on the author property. Rather simple, but I just get started by writing /query. That will start the query macro. This one is very simple. So I need to use a property, and I need to use the author property, and then the value is David Perel. And let's see. And that creates this. And something very interesting happens if you create a query based on a property. And let's open this in the main window so we have a little bit more space. So if you have not tested this out already on Friday, but when you create a query based on a property, you get this table view. So this is an example of Logseq enabling you to create your own data tables. So using properties, you can basically create your own data tables. Here in the block column, you see the title of the block, so the content of the parent block, and then you see the different properties. I can change these, so I can say I want to only see all the titles of the blocks, so the blocks themselves, the author, and the status. So I can disable the other properties, and then say, oh, here I now have all the blocks, all the content where the author is David Perel. As you can see here, I've used a link in the query itself. I think I could also do it with quotes, because why? These quotes basically say, hey, there's a string coming. So you can use these quotes instead of links in your property queries. So we've used links now, but as you can see, properties are different, that they can also just take text as an input. If we go to this block or this branch, you can see here, the top branch is what shows here in the block column. Then each individual piece of property here is visible here. What I have done here, and this is basically what I kicked off with in the session, I've made links out of these property values. Why is that? It doesn't really matter for properties themselves, because properties will work if the values are links or if they're just plain text. It doesn't really matter. But because this block, this first main block that contains these links are applied to all the blocks underneath. So this entire branch is tagged with David Perel, is tagged with video, is tagged with Twitter, with how-to, with processed. If I wouldn't have made these into links, these values would have only applied to the, to the block itself, so to this parent block. What is the result of this? Well, now, for example, I can go to the audience building page. I can go to the audience building page and then filter based on, let's see, I can filter based on David Perel. Obviously, David Perel is the only branch, or the only branch that is tagged with audience building is the David Perel branch. But as you can see, the values in the property block I can now use. If there were just plain text values without the square brackets around them, I couldn't use these as a filter in this case in the linked references, but equally in queries. Otherwise, you would be limited to only using those values using the property filter. Now I can just use these values also as normal link values. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please send me a DM, and I will try to rework my explanation and create some more demos for this. All right, let's see. We are half an hour in, and I want to see if there are some more questions or not. Let's see. Jerry, I don't know what you mean exactly with the question about iCloud. If it's queries related, please specify your question a little bit. If it's not queries related, I'm not going to answer it right now because I don't want to make this a generic session. I want to really focus on queries in this session. Let's see. All right, I see no more questions. So then today I'm going to keep the session short. No need to make it longer than necessary. I will add a few more notes for my personal graph in this graph. Then I'll zip everything up and draft an email, which you will receive between now and the next 90 minutes. And then have a look in the graph, just open it. And how do you open a new graph? If you go to the left sidebar here at the top, you see the name of your graph. Obviously, I'm using a custom theme, so let me change themes. So here at the top, you see all the graphs that you've already added. And then to add a new graph, just click here, this button, add new graph. I'll make sure to send along on how to add a new graph based on existing data. So no worries if you don't know how to do this. So that will come your way in a little bit. And then let's see, I see a final question before we leave. So is it possible to query for blocks with properties irrespective of the value using wildcards? Not in simple queries. As far as I know, this is possible using datalog, but datalog is outside of the scope. But datalog is definitely very powerful, and I think it enables you to use wildcards. If you want to know more about datalog, and let me share that, go to the Query Sprints forum, and then let's see, there's this thread with learning resources, which I will also put in the chat. But the wildcards, marking up marking up your tables using HTML, for example, that is all the domain of datalog. That is completely outside of the scope of this course because it's much more advanced, and I think we have enough to cover in this week just to make you familiar with the building query language of Logseq. Good question though. All right. If there are no more questions, I am going to end the session. I want to thank you all for tuning in live, for asking questions. If you have any comments, please use the forum as much as possible. I have gotten quite a few DMs. If you have a question that you think could benefit other learners, please ask it in the public forum. So again, I will share my screen so you can see which forum I mean. So if you go to discuss.logseq.com and then you scroll down to learning sprints and then you go to the query learning sprints, here are all the lessons. Many people have asked, especially here in lesson 5, they've used this topic to ask questions. But feel free to start your own new topic with your question. Just type in as clearly as possible what the question is about. And then in the description, please provide as much information as possible. When you ask a question, especially when it comes to queries, tell us what you have tried. So post the query code, so the actual query you've written. That will help us to spot any writing errors, especially with the parentheses. It's a very common error. In Friday's lesson, I forgot to put closing parentheses in a few examples, which shows how easy it is to miss one. So post the query code, and if possible, also post a screenshot of the data that you would expect to appear in the query, or even better, the actual text data. That will make it a little bit easier. So whenever you ask a question, provide what you've tried and provide us with what you expect to show in the query. It doesn't have to be everything, like just one note you expect to appear in the query and it's not showing. That already will help us a lot. What else? Just a general service or public service announcement. When you have been writing a lot of notes and you've been adding new links and properties and they don't show up in your queries, always make sure to re-index, because when you re-index, Logseq will look for all the links and then save those links in the database so it can show them in queries. All right, that is it for now. I'm going to finish this training data set. It will come your way in just a little bit. And I want to thank you for everything so far. This is a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot, so keep those questions coming. When you get stuck, when you think you found a bug, please report it to me, because this is not only to teach you how to use queries, but also for us to learn how we can make queries easier to use and to make them more useful for the average user, so you don't have to become a programmer to actually find your notes back. So with that, have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. I want to thank you so much, and I speak to you soon. Bye-bye.